Hi everybody, welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. Take a look at this on Israel 365 News. For the first time in 2,000 years, Israeli milled to produce Semolina kosher for temple offerings. Now, since I started my channel, we have seen a lot of these type of stories come out where something is happening for the first time in 2,000 years in Judaism. And to explain why I think this matters, we're going to skip all the way down to the bottom of this article, and hopefully this will help you see why. This initiative represents not only a technical milestone, but a spiritual one: the restoration of a chain broken for 2 millennia, tying modern Israeli agriculture and industry to the service of God in the land of the forefathers. For many, it is more than a flour product. It's a sign of redemption taking shape, one grain at a time. In Judaism, usually when they're talking about redemption, or gula is the Hebrew word, they're talking about the coming of the Messiah. They're talking about the start of the 1,000-year period that we would call the millennium. So it's another way of saying, from our point of view, this is something that's helping them prepare for the second coming, from our point of view. They're seeing it as a sign. And so that's why I'm interested in it, because I think the Lord speaks to every kindred, nation, tongue, people, tribe in a language that they understand, whether it's Judaism or whether it's Islam or whether it's sports. Some people, their life is sports. And so that's why I like to look at sports. And when interesting things happen, the Lord can use sports or whatever language to communicate with his children in a way that they understand. So, and I highlight restoration because in our own church, if we go to my spreadsheet called Timeline Phrases, and if you're new to my channel, what I do is I use the Scripture Citation Index, which allows you to search the scriptures, but it also lets you search General Conference talks going back to 1942. So what I've done is I've searched for all these words and phrases and tallied them up by year. And when you look at the phrase ongoing restoration, or phrases that are talking about the ongoing restoration, this is what we see. So here's 2025, and it goes back in time. Each cell goes back 1 year. And you can see, probably starting in 2019, the use of this phrase in General Conference has gone way up. It just suddenly is on the map, especially in the year 2020. Now, you do see a few before President Nelson's time, 2017, 2016, 2014. You go further back, and surprisingly, you hardly see it at all. Now, it may have been said in some other way, but the term ongoing restoration has really come to life with President Nelson's presidency. He's talked about the fact, and Elder Bednar and others have talked about the fact that not everything has been restored yet. Now, what we're talking about in this article has to do with the law of Moses, and I'm not implying that this is something that has to happen from our point of view. The law of Moses has been complete, but it's a similar parallel theme to what we're seeing in our church. This focus on the ongoing restoration. You see the parallel. Okay, so with that being said, let's go back up here. And actually, in case you're new to the channel or you don't really follow these stories that I cover, I have a spreadsheet. This one is called Signs Jewish Specific. And this is a timeline. And in column G, this is dedicated to any event that is taking place for the first time in 2,000 years. And you can see all these ones right here. Let's just do a quick rundown of what's been going on. 2015, a Judean date palm tree grown from 2,000-year-old seed successfully reproduces. This variety of tree had been wiped out around 500 AD. Okay, so that is the only one that I have that's before President Nelson's time. And then in 2021, here's the next one. For the first time in 2,000 years, Yair Levi becomes the first Levite to sing on the Temple Mount. Also in 2021, September 16th. For the first time in 2,000 years, rabbis have an official meeting on the Temple Mount to discuss Jewish law. The next one, October 15, 2023. For the first time in 2,000 years, a Jewish priest gives blessings to soldiers going to war. August 13th, 2024. For the first time in 2,000 years, silver temple trumpets were sounded on Temple Mount. October 6, 2024. For the first time in 2,000 years, the entire Rosh Hashanah service was observed on the Temple Mount, including the blowing of the shofar and the 13 full body prostrations. And then sometime in October 2024, for the first time in 2,000 years, a Cohen, which is a Jewish priest, who is descended from Aaron, the brother of Moses, ascended the Temple Mount in full priestly garb. So temple clothes for the first time in 2,000 years. And then the most recent one, before the one that we're talking about today, is this. June 2nd, 2025, for the first time in 2,000 years, a Cohen performs the 2 loaves sacrifice at the site of the temple courtyard on the Temple Mount. Rabbi Israel Ariel, head of the Temple Yeshiva and president of the Temple Institute, supervised. We're going to look at that one in just a minute. So now we have another one. Let's see, how many is this that I have on the spreadsheet? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is the 9th one that I'm aware of, and there may be more that I missed. If you're aware of any others, please send them my way. Okay. I also put this on my spreadsheet called Signs Jewish Specific. Oh no, I'm sorry. This one is Judaism Temple Preparation. This is a list of all the things that different groups, including the Temple Institute, the Sanhedrin, and there's some others too. This Midrash Lad, Hamikdash, and these different organizations have done all these things to prepare for the third temple. There's been a lot of preparation going on, and I don't think most people are even aware of it, unless you're Jewish and you're looking forward to Messiah coming, or if you're Christian and you're interested in the second coming. These are kind of the only groups that would be interested in this type of thing. Okay, because both groups would see these developments as significant in preparing in some way for the second coming. Okay, so let's go back to this. Here's a group of Kohanim, the Jewish priests. In a groundbreaking development with deep spiritual resonance, the Israeli milling company Steibel has announced plans to produce Semolina, specifically kosher and pure for the temple offerings, including the mincha, or meal offerings, and the shtai halakim, 2 loaves offering brought on the festival of Shavuoth, which is Pentecost. Hebrew language Makor Rishon reported that this marks the first time in millennia that a commercial company in the land of Israel will manufacture flour in accordance with the strict halakhic, or Jewish legal requirements for use in the temple. The semolina, made from new Israeli wheat, will be produced in a dry milling process that ensures it does not become ritually impure, a necessary condition for offerings brought to the altar in the Beit HaMikdash, or the Holy Temple. The first shelf-ready products are expected to become available by Sivan 5786, or on our calendar, June of 2026. I feel like a lot of things are happening over the next few years. When we look at 2026, 2027, 2030, and so forth, like I think about the open house for the Salt Lake Temple, and then it's the rededication. I think about just 2030 seems like it's a big year. And then later on, I already forgot. I think it's in 2034, we have the Winter Olympics that are going to be coming back to Salt Lake City. There's big things, on the horizon. Oh yeah, the bicentennial of the church in 2030. So anyway, I feel like this is maybe just another thing that kind of coincides with all these things. Okay, then there's a couple of scriptures. Leviticus chapter 2, verse 14. And if thou bring a meal offering of first fruits unto the Lord, thou shalt bring for the meal offering of thy first fruits green ears of corn, parched with fire, bruised corn of the fresh ear. Now, before we continue, I guess we should probably look at why this is significant or why this matters. The process of making the flour in this way. What does it matter? Well, if we go to the Institute Student Manual for the Old Testament, there's two manuals. This is the first one. I tried to see if it said anything about that specific scripture that we just read. It doesn't, but it does have a commentary for these other two verses that are right by it. So, why were leaven and honey prohibited and salt required? The prohibition against leaven also extended to honey. The ability of these elements to produce fermentation and spoilage made them excellent symbols of corruption. So this is really the whole thing right here. Symbols of corruption. Something which had no place in the refining and purifying effects of the law, which the sacrifices symbolized. Quote, whilst leaven and honey were forbidden to be used with any kind of meat because they were producing fermentation and corruption, salt, on the other hand, was not to be omitted from any sacrificial offering. Thou shalt not let the salt of the covenant of thy God cease from thy meat offering. Thou shalt never offer a meat offering without salt. The meaning which the salt, with its power to strengthen food and preserve it from putrefaction and corruption, imparted to the sacrifice was the unbending truthfulness of that self-surrender to the Lord embodied in the sacrifice, by which all impurity and hypocrisy were repelled. The salt of the sacrifice is called the salt of the covenant. Now let's just stop right here really quick. It makes you think about Christ talking about, the saints being the salt of the earth. You think about Salt Lake City being the headquarters of the church. We all know that salt is a powerful symbol in the scriptures and in the gospel. So just want to point this out, the power to preserve these sacrifices and all of this pointing to covenants, the covenant relationship with Christ. Salt. Okay. The salt of the sacrifice is called the salt of the covenant because in common life, salt was the symbol of the covenant. Treaties being concluded and rendered firm and inviolable according to a well-known custom of the ancient Greeks, which is still retained among the Arabs by the parties to an alliance eating bread and salt together as a sign of the treaty which they had made. As a covenant of this kind was called a covenant of salt, equivalent to an indissoluble covenant. So here the salt added to the sacrifice is designated as salt of the covenant of God because it's imparting strength and purity to the sacrifice by which Israel was strengthened and fortified in covenant fellowship with Jehovah. So this whole thing with this milling process and preparing the flour, the Jews take the scriptures very literally, and they're very strict with their interpretation and how things are supposed to be done. And in this case, it's the right thing to do because of what it represents. This would be, I don't know, I'm sure they probably interpret it the same way. This is why it needs to be done this way, because it's a symbol of purity. So you get the idea. Leviticus 23:17, ye shall bring out your habitations two wave loaves of 2/10 deals. They shall be of fine flour. They shall be baked with leaven. They are the first fruits unto the Lord. The effort was initiated by Sphere, a resident of Kfar Zaitim in the Lower Galilee, who has spent years researching the precise halakhic and technical requirements for preparing the temple meal offerings. While most people became aware of the Shtai Halakim during its symbolic reenactment on Shavuoth at the Temple Mount, Sphere has been engaged in this niche field for decades. Now, from a Jewish point of view, like from Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz's point of view, the one who wrote this article that I've interviewed before, this would probably be their version of looking at the Lord hastening his work. You have these people just coming together, doing these things, some of them independently. When you put it all together, it's like something is taking shape. This would be how they would view these type of things. Just like when we look at our own church and changes that are taking place and how things are being streamlined, and there's these big things happening where we know that the Lord is hastening his work. I think that this is their version of viewing the Lord as hastening his work. All right, continuing. Recognizing that temple offerings require semolina, ground from dry, unwetted wheat, as any contact with moisture makes it susceptible to ritual impurity. So that's probably like the honey, how that can spoil meat or corrupt the meat or whatever. Unwetted wheat, as any contact with moisture makes it susceptible to ritual impurity. Sphere worked for years to persuade Steibel to create a special product line. The company agreed in 2019, which was President Nelson's second year as president of the church, to invest in dry milling technology, but it was only in the past year that the process was finally tested. In standard milling, wheat kernels are moistened to ease grinding. But for temple use, this process is halakhically disqualifying. Creating dry milled semolina is much more complicated and results in significantly lower yields. Typically, only 3 to 5% of a wheat kernel can be used this way. So, a company that's trying to make money, that's probably not the best way to do it. To produce even 10 kilograms of semolina needed for the Shtai Halakim rehearsal, Sphere had to supply half a ton of organic wheat grown in Israel. So I did a search on Google and asked how much of a ton is 10 kilograms. And it turns out that it's about 1% of a ton. So just very, 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 very small amount. To produce even 10 kilograms of semolina needed for a Shtai Halakim rehearsal, Sphere had to supply half a ton of organic wheat grown in Israel. Through great effort and adherence to halakhic constraints, she succeeded, and miraculously, 40 kilograms of pure semolina were produced. Sphere's lectures sparked widespread interest. Again, probably the Lord hastening his work among the Jews. Widespread interest leading Steibel to make a strategic decision. They will now manufacture this rare product annually. The new product comes just in time, as an attempt to bring the 2 loaves of bread for the Shavuot wave offering nearly came to pass earlier this month, but was prevented by the Israeli police. And that's what we were talking about earlier. Here's some pictures of it. You had a Cohen, which is a Jewish priest, go up to the Temple Mount, and somebody brought him 2 loaves of bread for the 2 loaves of bread sacrifice, or whatever it's called. And this special type of flour was made just in time for this. It kind of makes me think about this last General Conference, how there were like 3 talks, I think, that talked about the parable of the 10 virgins. And it wasn't planned this way, but the statue of the 5 wise virgins was installed on Temple Square just in time for conference. So anyway, this was another first, even though they didn't complete the sacrifice, the offering. It's the first time in 2,000 years that anybody had done this or had started to do this on the Temple Mount. All right, going back here. Now we're at the bottom of the article. Though Steibel is not making any theological statements about the imminent rebuilding of the temple, the company is proud to play a role in reviving a long dormant aspect of Jewish life. Friedman compares his efforts to the family of Beit Garmu, who were responsible for baking the lechem hapanim, or showbread, in the temple. And then I'm going to read this last part again. This initiative represents not only a technical milestone, but a spiritual one, the restoration of a chain broken for 2 millennia, tying modern Israeli agriculture and industry to the service of God in the land of the forefathers. For many, it is more than a flour product. It is a sign of redemption taking shape, 1 grain at a time. Or possibly the way that we could look at it, it's a sign of the second coming taking shape, as the Lord prepares them for Messiah to come. Okay, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.